Alright, so here's another one of the pages that I actually wanted to sit down and work on a bit today in this video. And this is actually just a chapter cover for the second chapter in Phase Volume 1. And before I get into that, I just wanted to give you an example of why I decided to adopt this into my series. Okay, so here is a cover. And this is by one of my favorite artists and one of my favorite comics. And what he does is he actually creates a chapter cover for every chapter. And sometimes he even does a few pages. Sometimes they're black and white, sometimes they're fully colored. And I really like this idea because, first of all, it gives you a break in between doing, like, in between reading the chapters, more or less. And what it also does is you get to kind of have some fun with it. Like in this case, I like this a lot because this is not generally what the characters are doing in this comic in particular, because this comic's actually a lot about martial arts and fighting. So to see the characters kind of in different clothes, having a fun time, I think that's a really awesome thing to do. What I also really like about this one in particular is just the sense of perspective, which is like this more or less. It's just really dynamic, and I really, really also like the screen toning effects here into the clouds. Like, I think it really sets this piece up. So, um, and another thing too, like, every book's different, but instead of calling a chapter, this one he calls fight, and it makes more sense just for the type of comic that it is. So, in my case, they're just going to be called chapters. So, jumping back over. Um, so this is, like I said, this is a rough sketch, essentially, for the second chapter. And, funny thing is when I sometimes post little sneak peeks and stuff, I sometimes have people ask me, like, why are they naked? And I know it's kind of weird, but I'm actually just doing it for the fact of I'm going through literally page by page and really just blocking these characters in, getting to know them and everything, and I'm just focusing on that right now and making sure that everything's really perspectively correct. And technically speaking, when I went to school, we drew we drew from live models naked and everything, and really just studied the way the body looks. So I always, no matter what it is, I always draw them like this, and then I come back after to do the clothes. It's just in terms of consistency and proportioning to make sure that it's all correct. So that's what I've done here. I went and I thought about this for a while, and most graveyards are just flat, more or less. So I sat down and thought, well, how can I take a traditional graveyard and give it something different, make it dynamic, because that's what I'm all about with this comic. And so I thought, well, why don't we have it like she's kind of going up a hill and the gravestones are kind of going up in a hill. So that's kind of what I have going on here. I roughly put all of that in, and I've got her in a interesting dynamic pose, and she's in the foreground. So when it comes to fully rendering this out and doing my screen toning, she's gonna have some darker lines around her, and that's gonna actually make it really look like she's in the foreground, which is also a really great effect. So, in terms of when I'm working, I pretty much split up everything up into levels. So I have always like a base sketch layer, and I bring in like other layers for what I need. So that, let's say, like I get so far in and I just don't like the way the hair is or something, I can just take the hair layer out and redo it, instead of having to lose the whole image. I usually always separate the characters from the background, so by the time I'm done, I have like, sometimes I could have hundreds of layers. Like, it's ridiculous, but it really works for really being able to go in and just get more accomplished. And this is actually the main reason why I do all of this digitally, because on paper it's just paper. It's one flat piece of paper, and you can't really go in and tweak all of that. You have to kind of do it all right there on one page, and that's what I really like about digital is you got a lot of range and you can do a lot of effects when it comes to getting all those details in there. So that's why I'm really into this digital movement. I'm working on a Photoshop with my drawing tablet at Wacom, and I think what we're gonna do on this is I'm gonna add a layer in underneath here. This is what I generally do, and I try and label it so I don't lose where I am. So at this point, this is where it kind of takes some figuring out. So the great thing about Photoshop is when it comes to your brushes, you do have a nice set generally to start off with, like just a nice basic set, and you can add lots of other brushes in, and you can actually create your own brushes. And I just find it's really awesome to work with. So, and there's actually a lot of different things you can turn on and off. You can like rotate it, like there's just a lot of techniques that you can do digitally. So, I don't know, I generally do like trial and error when it comes to trying to set something up, especially when I'm going in to do coloring. So, in this case, we generally bring it down so it's translucent. And then just to like see, so this is not what I'm looking for at all. And it happens sometimes, like you don't really know what to expect with the brushes, so that's why I really trial and error it. You just play around until you find what you're looking for, essentially. I'm just gonna jump right in here. And one of the things I like to do is just get right in there. Start laying in some tones. And this is the other great thing about layering, I don't have to have it perfect, I can do a few layers and work up the tones so that it gets to where I want it to be. So for what I'm doing right now, I'm just going to get a tone going in here, just around her. Just start to build it up. This scene's at night, so we're gonna start with just a very basic darker tone here. And in the case of what I'm doing, I actually go around first and bring it up to the edge of the character like this. So I'm gonna continue with this. Because I actually find it a lot easier when rendering a character to kind of go from a dark to light when building the tones. So this is a main reason why I'm going in to do it this way. Getting these this dark tone around is going to help with that a lot. So you can also bring in a bit of a shadow to the edge of your character too, like this. So I'm just gonna step back here for a sec. I generally do that. I'll work on a bit and then I'll just pull it back just to make sure that it's going in the right direction. Alright. Now, I'm gonna continue in through here. So I have a moon in this picture, which I really like doing moons, so I'm gonna bring down my opacity and I'm gonna bring up the size because I would like to do more of like this sort of effect. It's not gonna be quite as dark right around it. You know, and then what I do is I pop this back up to about where I was. And this is where I go in and continue on. This case, oh, wrong one. I got to bring down my brush size because I'm going to go back in here. To work on these tones. Also, just for like the subject matter of phase in general, it's gonna be a lot of dark tones. Um, so this is something I'm gonna get to do a lot. So I'm just gonna add a little bit more in here where I need to. So up in here. Yeah, so I always just do around the edges. Around like the smaller, like the character and like the smaller details in the page when I start to tone in like this, just to make sure I get in there properly. And then what I do is I bring myself back out again and I just do a check to make sure, okay, so I've got my key dark areas brought in. And see, now that might have taken a while, but what's good about all of this is then I go back in. I can really essentially bring this up as big as I want to, depending on how fast I want to work and just like the area I'm working in. So like, I'm gonna bring it down a bit actually. And then at this point, this is when I can just really start to tone all of the rest of this in. Like, yes, I know this is not the same tone, but I'm just gonna build it all in a little faster here. And it's gonna start to kind of blend in like this as you see what's going on here. And I'm trying to create like this kind of smoky effect here. If some areas cause me trouble, like in here, this is when I would literally bump this up significantly. Just because that was having a hard time toning. Sometimes it happens, and even sometimes I have to create additional layers to be able just to get those tones to come through correctly. So now I just got to be a little careful in around here because we don't want it to get too dark. I'm just gonna bring it way down. For moons, I always just leave it. I like it, make it really simple just like that, and then actually later on when I'm doing my highlights and everything is when I really start to pull some tones in there. Just gonna really, okay. It's more or less that's the first thing I would do. And then in the case of this, I'm just gonna scroll it a little further. I always do this. Just really take a look at it to make sure it's going where I want it to. It's something that I do frequently. So at this point, I'm going to bring another layer in. Sometimes it's a pain. There we go. Okay. Now we get to have some fun with this. So gotta do some trial and error again. See, in this case, this is way too big. And it happens, so sometimes the greatest way to I can start like this. Oh. So I'm just gonna kind of go in, and this is a kind of cool, really simple way to bring an effect in there. So when I'm building up stars, this is generally how I would start. Just start with some little simple dots in here, just the start of that. There doesn't even have to be that many in particular. There could be a couple really bright ones, like just to kind of make it all pop. And then the cool thing is about this is what I can do to give more effect to it is I bring this brush right up, essentially, and I drop this really low. And I can do some like this. Okay, so this is how we get the glowy atmospheric effect to go on here. And I can kind of drag it along. I like to put it with the brighter stars, more or less, just to show that it's working, that you're getting that effect. So in this case, I have to bring it down in size so I can really get this effect going. So what I do, I'm gonna come right in here. This is called luminosity. Just really give it. And this is also something I can do on the moon here too. I can pull out brighter sections like this if I wanted to, or kind of lighten up in here again, give it some lines, some light lines, whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish. I really like this. I really like this effect. I actually, when I'm going to color a person, this is actually one of the things that I do a lot to really get their tone to come out. So I start from dark, like I get just a good base tone color, and then I like to use this luminosity to really bring out the highlights in the skin and give it that sense of realisticness. So I'm gonna just pull back now. And so yeah, this is a rough look at how I would start to go in and screen tone that, get it all ready. Generally after this step, when I would get my base tones and idea in there, that's when I would later be searching for a brush that's got a lot of grit to it, got a lot of texture. Like maybe one of these ones. I could even use like one of these paint brushes probably. But yeah, that's when I would go in, find one of these to work with. So right now I just have a small amount of presets, but this is essentially where I would go in to start adding more details and textures. So in this case, it's kind of gets difficult actually when working on like a really large file because I have to keep bringing down the size of the brushes so that they will fit and be like the right size when I'm going into to do this. Oh, that's not supposed to do that. Alright. Just wanted to give a little bit of a start of a texture into that. And so I'm gonna look again. We're gonna jump into this sort of it's hard to see, so what I'm gonna do is gonna bring this out. I'm gonna bring us in. So right now it's pixelated, yes. Sometimes I actually have to work like this. It really sucks, but just so I can get in there and really start to see the texturing here. So right now I'm just trying to give it a little bit more of a stone look. And because of this side is actually going to be the side that needs the most tone because it's on the opposite side of the moon, so I have to bring these darker tones in along the edge here just for that effect. So what I'll do now is what I always do. I just bring it out just to kind of look at it. And it's basically what I would do. My next step in all of this would be to get all of these colored in like with a base light gray, and then I would go in and do some dark line work, and then I would go in and do this effect that I just did right here. And then after that, I would literally jump in here with my base brush I use for most. Bring the size up a little bit. I would bring it back to a white again. literally just start doing this. And honestly speaking, I literally go between dark and light, like a million times until I'm essentially happy with the overall look of what's going on. And see, the cool thing about this is because it is in front of the moon, I always gotta keep doing this, essentially. Always gotta give it a bit of a reminder to that it is there in front. So there's gonna be this darker contrast in here always. Just around the edge. So this just gives it that those extra tones really that really pull it all together, I find. It's definitely a lot of back and forth, like so now I'm gonna do my thing where I check for consistency. So yeah, this is pretty much what I'll be doing with this page, and just to bring it to life. In terms of this page in particular, I would actually go through and I will do all of the background first, just so I really get a tone of the background. And just for an example, I'm going to pull a layer in here for fun. And I think in terms of the moon, what I could do is, let's see here, I can create some light lines. Just an effect here, so I go like this. Get it to about the size that I want it. We're gonna bring it to white. And gotta bring this down actually, because I don't want to hurt it, but I can literally, if I wanted to, I could do a little bit of light lines coming towards Jamie here. And these would like really touch on the front of her skin there. These are just some effect lines. I'm not sure if I'll do this yet, but this is something that I could do. I could just have some lines coming down, touching her, so that would make her face would end up being really light, and like her hair on the top there and all in along here would end up being really light, which I think could really set the overall tone for this. So yeah, thank you for joining me here, and definitely stay tuned for more on this.